So I'm going to break down a couple of different ways that I would approach this puzzle. First thing to think about is I would try to think about what this would be like in a game. In a game, I'm seeing that I'm under threats, and if the queen takes this pawn, it's check. My king really can't go this way. He would have to actually make his way over here. Maybe I could get a little bit of space if my knight were to move. And then I start thinking about, because of this threat, what can I do? Because maybe this knight would move because my queen's in an awkward position. Now in a game, I could potentially come back here, and this seems certainly playable, but it might be a losing position because I've got a little bit of an initiative here on the king, and maybe coinciding with that knight move, moving my knight up here, now I've got a checkmate threat. So first I'm looking at defense, like what do I have to worry about? I have to worry about this pawn. At the same time, I also have to worry about this pass pawn moving, which means that this rook can never move, because if it moves, I've only got two rooks defending the h1 or h8 square, which means that he has two defenders of the h8 square, so the pawn can promote. So this rook can never move. But those couple of things are combined. So I know that I have to defend this pawn, or if I don't defend it, I at least create a threat. So my first thought is, why not create the threat? And when I'm thinking about that, what can he do to alleviate the threat? Well, to stop checkmate, because this knight's here, it's actually blocking the rook from defending mate, and this rook can't defend mate because the queen would just take it right away, and then the threat of mate is still there. So that means if my knight moves, the only thing he can do is push this pawn, which creates a weakness here on c3. So now I've got a fork, and a fork is going to win a piece, and the question is, when I win that piece, am I losing over here? So it's a two-front issue, trying to solve the issue of my pawn, my weakness, because if this pawn falls, and then this one, and now I've got these two pawns to worry about in addition to the already passed pawn on h7, locking in my rook at h8. So therefore, my thought is I could passively bring my queen back. I could bring it all the way back to try to trade queens. I could also bring this rook over. And I don't like either of these moves because it distracts from the possibility of this. So therefore, my answer is to go knight to a4 and try to create a counter threat. So I had to calculate before that what happens here. As we saw before, I could potentially come over this way as an outlet. Now that fails right away because the queen could take e6. I also have the rook potential check coming down here, which forces me to take back with the bishop, because as we said earlier, the rook on h8 can't recapture because then this promotes right away. So because of all of that, and I had to calculate this before I did the aggressive attack, the mating idea, I'm just going to slide back here because my escape square is not actually b6, it's b8. So in this case, I would move down to d8. If the opponent decides to continue checking, now I've got my zigzag and I can get to safety, and then they still have to worry about this. And then, as we said, the only way to stop it is pushing b3, which loses a piece. And then still in a pretty good position. So I'm going to go down to king d8, and now the opponent has to do the move that we said to stop checkmate. And now the question is, can I escape? We know the answer, I can still escape. So why not just win material? So knight checking on c3, and now can I create another mate threat? Before just jumping into taking material, seeing, is there a mate threat? I could see a2 could potentially be mate, but what way would my opponent block that? If I go here to threaten, or I guess to a5, the rook can just slide up to d2. So I don't think I have an immediate threat. I could think about sacking, but I can't then take here because the king is now protecting. So the sack doesn't do anything. So the answer is I would take here, and then white has to take back because I've got a mate threat of right away, queen coming into c4 if the queen were to take this pawn, for example. So the answer is let's just take here. And now the question is, what is the follow-up? How do I simplify things? So I've solved the puzzle of getting an extra piece, but how do I make use of this? Well, looking at this bishop, ever since the beginning, it couldn't really move anywhere. So it's not a well-placed bishop. This knight has to go here and here, so that's definitely a threat. So it's going to activate its pieces. So I want to get rid of everything over here if I can. I've already distracted the one rook and brought it over to d1. So that means that this is actually a possibility to take the h7 pawn. And because I'm already attacking it once, why not try to attack it again? So let's bring our queen here, force the queen trade. So actually it's not forced, but if the queen takes, my king can take and there's no way to protect this pawn easily. Rook slides back over, my other rook would. Actually in this case probably maybe even slide up here, try to create some countermeasures. There's no rush on this. But I could easily just go here, bring my king back, and then take this pawn. That's a possibility, but the point is solidifying or simplifying the position is the best bet. If the queen goes away, I can take with queen or rook, probably queen, just for activity. I guess either one could work. So I think just coming in here seems to be the best answer. If they take, great. So at this point, looking at the analysis after the puzzle is done, the knight would come in here potentially, but I can just kind of take this pawn, even if we were to continue playing, just taking the pawn, and it's even suggesting to take here. So the point is that you've got your piece up, you've simplified the position so the queen is gone, and it all stemmed from creating a counter threat and then recognizing what the threat was, which is what I would do in a normal game too. So I really like this realistic tactic. I thought it was a good one to solve.